Been talking to her on Instagram for months. You feel me? I done spent damn near 5 G's on this. She talking about she don't want nobody touching her. Man, you got me up. You mean? Well, you can leave. First of all, hold on. I been. First, she talking about she don't even fly Spirit, right? The talking about she don't fly Spirit. Like she like okay. So I get her motherfucking. So I get her motherfucking Delta. That's damn near 600-700 last minute, right?
Okay.
So plus her bags, check-in, all that shit. We go get her the Uber, all that shit. Then I'm damn near at 2 G's already. So we get here. First night I'm been a whole gentleman. I've been a whole gentleman. Have you not? Have I not been a gentleman to you though? Have I not did anything? But you should have knew what it was if I flew you out here though. Why come out here then?
What do you mean?
So y'all, this is their Instagram model. You know what? I ain't gonna even be no petty ass. Put your name on there like that. Okay, so why would you come halfway across the country knowing you didn't want to on that? I ain't say you did. You know what it was though. You knew what it was.
You want to spend money.
I spent 5 G's on you. What are you talking about?
No, I don't have to f you if I don't want to f you. But why come out here then? Okay. This is the problem with turning our relationships into a domain of market relations. I've been thinking about this marketization of things which ought not to be marketized and which inevitably are doomed to fail if we apply the same sort of logic of the market onto them. And I think I've just been thinking about this just because of something which recently happened to me, which in a way mirrors this, but also doesn't. And I think the important difference between my situation and this situation is a point that should be elaborated on. So in this situation, this gentleman flew out this woman, an Instagram model, and it cost him about 5G, as he said. And in this sense, there was an unspoken agreement that this was about sex, an exchange relationship, definitely the creme de la creme of a sexual marketplace arrangement. This is very much in line with just modern love as we see it, the idea of online dating. It's sort of an exchange relationship. It is sort of the manifestation and actualization of a literal sexual marketplace. So that's their situation. My situation involved me a few months ago going up to a different county and needing accommodation. I have a friend who lived in this county and we've been friends for years now. He's a great fellow. We get on swimmingly. And the first night that I was there was an awkward moment, and a moment in which he basically expected us to have intercourse. Now, on reflection, this is an interesting situation because there is a clear notion of an exchange that is about to take place. My friend has offered me free accommodation, otherwise I would have to pay for an Airbnb or hotel or hostel, etc. So there is that sort of element of he gives me something, therefore what am I going to give him? In this case, his ultimate expectation was that I was going to give him sex. Now, there's an important characteristic and feature in all of this, which means that to this day, we are still as close as ever. He has found somebody else, is happy. We laugh at this now. And, you know, we've moved on with our lives. The important thing was that we were friends long before this happened. He knows me inside and out. I know him inside and out. So on that night when evening came and he spoke to me and sort of tried to make his attempt at moving in on me, I said no, and we spoke about it. We spoke for quite a few hours, actually, about his feelings then for me, about my feelings for him, about our friendship, about why I didn't want to sleep with him, about why I was at the time, and I guess still now, hung up on somebody else, and therefore this just was not something that I wanted to do. And it was okay. Yes, it was difficult in the moment. It was incredibly awkward. It was a lot of vulnerability, a lot of telling the truth. But I was able to be 100% with him, and he was able to be 100%, if not 101% with me. And we got through it because we had that important foundation of friendship, genuine friendship, which lasts to this day. So when I rejected him, it didn't sort of decimate his manhood. It also didn't result in, metaphorically speaking, an arrow through his heart and him falling on hard concrete and not being able to recover from it. Instead, yes, it was a bit of a figurative arrow to the heart, but I was also there to catch him. Or maybe, if I'm not going to be the hero in the story, there was a pillow. underneath him. It wasn't a fall that he couldn't recover from. And importantly, it also wasn't a fall that our friendship couldn't recover from and evolve from. This is something that I think is really missing in the modern sexual marketplace. And it is also why I am a huge proponent of us leaving the sexual marketplace when it comes to actually trying to form relationships with other people. Because in this TikTok situation, there is a clear market mindset. These individuals really deserve each other. Well and truly, they deserve each other 100%. She knew what she was doing. She knew what she was getting herself into. She knew that she was using this gentleman for his money, for the clout, for the experience of being able to wine and dine and enjoy a vacation somewhere else. And based on their meeting on Instagram, it is quite obvious that he was just into her because of how she looked. She was an Instagram model. On the other hand, even if he didn't realize that she wasn't going to sleep with him, he got himself into this situation and he ultimately has to take responsibility for it. This dynamic between these two is a clear example of everything that is wrong with the modern sexual marketplace. We are increasingly, at least Gen Z and young millennials, are increasingly approaching relationships in the same way that we approach any consumer dynamic. We see individuals not as people, but as a market asset or a market liability. We see them as ultimately increasing our market value. But then on the other hand, we want meaningful connections with people, or we want a long-term relationship with them. Even if in this situation, it's just about this guy wanting to get laid by an Instagram model, he still likely wants a long-term arrangement of that sense with her, insofar as the long-term clout and value may come from it. The issue is that when you become a consumer, you feel entitled to something because you put something into the marketplace and you expect something in return. And if you don't get it in return, well, that's a loss to you. That's seen as a negative and terrible thing, an unjust thing, which is exactly how this gentleman has approached this situation. And this is most definitely what I have found contemporary dating to be like. I feel that when I go on a date, there is that underlying expectation of sexual intimacy, of me giving them something in return. And this is no way to start a relationship, a meaningful, impactful relationship. Sure, if it's about sex, typically there's some kind of very open and stark arrangement that's been established beforehand, if not even a contract. But I would hazard that the majority of young people in modern societies are looking for something a bit beyond that. And I can't believe on a video about dating, I am going to be referencing Nietzsche. But I do think that Friedrich Nietzsche says the most succinct and important thing about this. Nietzsche writes very interestingly and succinctly about sexual love and how it is basically just about possession. It isn't about actually desiring the person. It is about willing desire, or rather being inflated by desire in and of itself, which is why it is so easy to desire after different people. It is why desire is so fleeting, why there is an object of desire, but why that object rarely changes quite often and frequently. It is sort of the manifestation of a will to power over another individual. And in a brief sentence, he contrasts this sexual love with friendship. There is, of course, here and there on this terrestrial sphere, a kind of sequel to love, in which that covetous longing of two persons for one another has yielded to a new desire and covetousness, to a common higher thirst for a superior ideal standing above them. But who knows this love? Who has experienced it? Its right name is friendship. And I do see this in the manosphere quite a bit, a lack of a reckoning with the very real fact that there are couples who are in sexless relationships. But if you ask them, as I have asked several of my friends who are more so Gen X, sort of heading toward boomer territory, if I ask them, would you ever divorce your partner? Would you ever leave your partner whom you have elaborated to me you are not in any physical relationship with? The idea absolutely astonishes them and their partners, those of whom I've spoken to, because there is such an unconditional love, which I think is far more conducive to friendship than it is to sexual love. There is an appreciation, a real appreciation of the individual, that person being their significant other in the literal literal sense. That person is significant as an individual in and of themselves. And yes, in that there are ups and downs. Of course, there is and are moments of resentment, moments of wanting that sexual intimacy, but that is something that they can get through or find resolutions and solutions to in their own time, at their own pace, in their own ways, because there is that mutual respect. There is that reciprocity of unconditional love in sickness and in health till death do us part. And when it comes to considering love and this higher ideal of love, it seems quite laughable to associate it with our modern relationships. And I find it quite laughable myself. Sometimes I chuckle when I think of sort of modern dating and my modern dating experiences in relation to this idea of loving somebody till death do us part and unconditionally. But when I think of it in the context of a friendship, a genuine long-term friendship, it seems far more plausible and far more realistic and a lot less daunting. I think it's so important for us to establish friendships with people before we go into the sexual marketplace. I think it's so important for us to actually befriend a potential partner before we actually become consumers. And I think what dating apps have done and what a lot of rhetoric surrounding modern love has done is completely stripped away that important tenet, that important aspect of establishing that foundation of real mutual respect, understanding, and honesty, that essential basis and tenet in which romantic love can then stem off from. You don't go onto dating apps in order to make friends. And if you do, it's very unlikely that the majority of people on dating apps are there to make friends. It is clearly an investment. In fact, even whilst the economy plummeted, Gen Z were willing to spend more on dating app subscriptions. There is definitely an incentive. There is definitely a fear of missing out. There is definitely an idea that because everybody else is doing it, I have to do it. But I do think we need to leave the sexual marketplace and reevaluate our personal moral faculties and reevaluate our relationships with human beings. Because it's impossible in the long term to respect a commodity without wanting to replace it or to upgrade it. It's also impossible for us to find that thing which we seemingly all want, which is happiness in ourselves and with our lives, when we view people through the same lens of opportunity or lack thereof as we would going into any marketplace. A person's value is a very personal thing. It's a very individual thing that only you can really understand and explain to yourself. Actually, sometimes you really can't even explain it to yourself. It just is. There is no universal criteria for it, and I think when it comes to this TikTok, for instance, we can see how disjointed the two sexes are. We can see how disjointed this heterosexual sphere of dating is becoming with younger generations. When I see headings such as "Men are the offer, women choose," "After sex, he has more power and she needs to chase commitment," "Female beauty confers huge power and determines her sexual mores," "Women want money and commitment," MPI theory, "Before sex, she has more power. After sex, he has more power and she needs to chase commitment." It's no wonder young people hate dating and hate the idea of love, especially modern love. And I think it's hard for young people, especially now when everything seems to be so heavily marketized. I was even thinking about school, the sort of place, the main place, the primary domain where you make friends. With the influence now of social media, of the internet, of especially the increasing marketization of education at a younger and younger age, and you are just in this perpetual market and competition with people, with your peers, with what they wear, with what they post on social media, their followers, etc. How can we make real friends and real connections when the market has just infiltrated everything? And I think this has a lot more to do with the culture surrounding markets than with markets themselves. Markets have exceptional value. I could not imagine a world without markets. But in terms of the justification of markets spreading and having no limitation, I think that has a lot to do with our philosophical tenets, with our culture, with our liberal culture, or rather neoliberal culture. And It is quite heartbreaking to see and to endure and experience. I think I'm definitely not alone in this. So anyway, I'd love to have a conversation about this because this TikTok raised some interesting questions and concerns for me. I think it's time that we leave the sexual marketplace. And I don't think that means that we therefore dismiss and leave the prospect of love. So thank you for watching, and I will see you very soon in the next one.